always looking for the best way to serve their clients and improve their products. Our guest today is Kyle Stanton. He'll go over some of the science behind these fancy gadgets, and I think you're going to enjoy it very much. Stand by while I see if I can press the buttons. Okay, are you there, Kyle? Are you ready?
Thank you, John, for having us on the show. Heard great things about this, so we were very excited about this opportunity. So I'm from a company called Tracer Imaging. We did a presentation before at the New York Association meeting. My name is Kyle, and I'm just kind of going to go through what lenticular is, how you can use it, and what really makes it a unique medium, aside from other styles. So just a brief overall history lesson. It actually is pretty cool, so don't be too bored. So in 1908, one of the first lens styles was created, and that's called the fish eye lens. Now, what that is that it's actually little bubbles kind of stuff going into it, right? Now, the next lens that comes out in the 20s is now the actual linear lenticular lens. And this is what kind of set the lenticular industry on the path that it's in today. This is the lens that is widely used, and it is probably used in 95% of all lenticular printing. So the problem with lenticular back in the day was that it was so expensive to do mass production. So because of the high cost and the low quality, companies moved away from it. You know, as you can see, there's a JFK campaign pin, a Cracker Jack ring, and an Olympic keychain. So those things are really cool, and that's what their lenticulars meant for, little tchotchkes. However, it was just too expensive, so they had to move away from that. Now, coming into like the 90s and kind of the more of the 21st century, the technological advancements, the new formats, the printer technology, all of those things combined created and molded the industry to what it is today. So Tracer, as a company, we can print anywhere from a small sheet at a 14 by 20 to a 2840, and then we can actually go up to about a 48 by 72, maybe a little bigger, but we also splice or tile together several lenses, all right? So lenticular today, better quality, more affordable, which means more people are interested in using it. So one of the most popular effects, and I guarantee you everybody has seen this at some point in their lives, most popular in, museum gift shops or something along those lines, is the flip. The flip is really cool because it actually changes from image A to image B. The morph is another unique style, and that actually is several frames combined together, and you see each individual frame changing. In this particular instance, Bumblebee from the Transformers movie changes from the car to his robotic form. And you can kind of see it's the little frames in between, you see the change happen, hence morph. Zoom, really self-explanatory, but really cool. You start at a far angle, and then you zoom into a certain location. That location can be selected as well during pre-press, which is pretty cool. Full motion video, everybody knows what that is, another self-explanatory one. We can fit up to about 3 seconds of video into a lenticular piece. So the capabilities of that are almost endless in terms of what you want to get in there. And from an artistic standpoint, you could really tell a very cool story utilizing this method. So the pre-press for all these effects, flip, morph, zoom, 3D as well, and full motion video is very simple. It's just a layered Photoshop file, 300 DPI minimum. And Tracer takes the files, masters them, and prints for you. Full motion video is a little different in terms of prep. We need a sequence of images, self-explanatory as to why that is. The science behind the actual lenses is fascinating, even if you're not into that sort of thing. So a lenticular lens is actually just an array of lenticules in a linear pattern. And each lenticular sheet has lenticules that have peaks and valleys, okay? So a valley is the same width as a human hair. So it's insanely small, and the peak is the higher point, as you can see in that photo. LPI is a common term, 62 LPI. What that actually means is that there's 62 lenticules per inch. So that's, once again, it goes back to how small and how precise the printers have to be to drop the inks on this. So 75 LPI, 75 lenticulars or peaks per inch. Each base, lenticular base, is 0.01385824 inches. That, I mean, that's just incredibly tiny. We are able to fit 32 interlaced images, or essentially strips, per base. So if you break it down, each base is 0.0004 inches. And we print all 32 exactly within that space. Each color is covered in there, but I mean, I cannot stress enough how tiny that is. And that's why the printers are so high tech, and the advances in that technology were so imperative for the industry, because you can hit that accurately. We have, 99% success rate with our print. That's incredible. So color misregistration and lens misregistration is illustrated here. And you can see how the actual lines do not fall within the black lines within the yellow photo. This is, again, color misregistration. You can see it's off. And this is correct. So you see the lines on the right side and the left side go right down the middle, and then the black rectangle is dead center there as well. That is correct color and lens registration, and this would be deemed up to our standards and would be printed on. This is a very cool animation. So as you know, it's all in the eyes. It's all optical, okay? So as you look through the lens at different angles, that's what shows you the different images, and that's what this animation is showing you. 3D has a narrower viewing angle because of how much is packed into that lens, whereas an animation has a wider viewing angle, because animation, you're usually walking across and you want to cover more distance and see more of the actual content. So once again, John, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask, and thank you very much for having me.
Okay, now do you guys, okay, great. Yeah, no problem, no problem. It's no big deal. You don't need to look at this forever. This is just the same title screen I had last week. So if you haven't put your glasses on, get ready to. You don't have to do it quite yet, but this is all anaglyph. Do you have a link to information about spherical depth maps? Yeah, there's a guy named Michael Beach, B-E-E-C-H, who wrote a book called Mastering 2D to 3D Conversion. And in there, he gives the formulas that I use to convert that moon and also that globe, the sphere. It's called by the way, I found the name of that thing in that flushing image. It's called the unisphere. So it's a lot of math involved, but that's the credit for that. How is the anaglyph view turned on in Photoshop? Well, you're about to see. There's no technical anaglyph view, and at least in my version of Photoshop, I'm on CS5. Maybe they included something since then, but I just basically stack the layers in a way that not only am I able to see it in anaglyph, but I can zoom in. In other words, any image, you can just zoom in and move around, and you don't have to reframe it like you would a side-by-side or a parallel image or anything like that. So I work in anaglyph not just for the ease of it, but also keep in mind, I'm working on the actual master image, so I can very quickly, especially with actions, very quickly create a side-by-side image from that anaglyph. I'm not limited to just working on an anaglyph, and I think that was also something that people got confused on last week. I'm working in anaglyph, but I'm creating the master left-right file, and you can do it anything you want with that. Can I do all the same stuff in GIMP? I would just about imagine so, because like I said, I'm on an old version of Photoshop, and there's nothing new about it. And I think GIMP has been around for a while. It's open source, and people have added stuff to it. And the final question I got before we looked at an image here is what spacecraft I was sitting in last week. I actually don't have a cool 3D background behind me this week because I just got done upgrading my OS to handle the Zoom upgrade, and long story. But anyway, let's take a look at an image real quick that, let's say you wanted to convert this, and there's two basic ways to do it. Can you guys see, I'm gonna move this little Zoom screen here. Can you guys see over here on the right where it has like two folders and an original layer beneath it? I know it's kind of small, but I'm gonna open up these folders. In each one of these folders, let me just get rid of this layer that I don't need. In each one of these folders, I have put a channel mixer adjustment layer. And this channel mixer adjustment layer basically is what allows me to do this whole anaglyph process. So instead of just taking all the red from the left image and all the green and blue from the right image and smashing them together, I actually add a little bit. I don't know if you can see my mouse circling here. I couldn't find a way to zoom in, unfortunately, on Zoom, ironically. But I actually add a little bit of green and blue back into the red, into the left, and add some red back into the right channel as well. So in a color anaglyph, that's what I was explaining last week, doesn't give you a headache. It's more like that half color anaglyph process. Now let's say I wanted to take this 2D image, and I made it black and white this week just to make it easy. I'm just going to basically put a copy of it in the left folder, and I'm going to put this original in the right folder. Now, if you're concerned, it's not a bad idea to make a safety copy and leave it up there and lock it away and never turn it on. And you know, that way, if anything ever goes wrong, you know you've got the original 2D image. But my personal way is I always use the left image as the original. So that way I know I've left it alone, you know, so to speak. So basically I've got two images here, and all I had to do, each one has its channel mixer sort of assigned to it because it's in its own folder. I don't even have to lock the layer to it, which is kind of cool, because now I can drop in elements on top of this photo, like a new sky or, you know, corrective elements, and it'll all get treated by this one channel mixer layer, which is very nice. So right now, all I'm seeing is 2D because I haven't done any changes at all. Excuse me while I grab a sip of water. Now, the traditional way people might say is, okay, I'm going to do a depth map. And a depth map is simply, I'm going to click on the new layer button. I'm going to put this way up on top so it's kind of obvious. And I'm going to go over here to my tool palette and get this thing called a gradient tool. And a gradient tool is basically, it says, okay, I'm going to smoothly blend from the two colors I have selected up here, which happen to be, well, they don't happen to be. I pre-selected 50% gray and 100% black. And that's because 50% gray is at the level of the window. So I'm just going to draw a gradient from the bottom right up to the horizon. And the reason I'm doing that is I want everything above the horizon, for now at least, to be at infinity. And I want the road stretching out from my feet to infinity. So that's going to go from 50% gray to black. So now when I release this gradient tool, watch what happens. Okay, now what we see is just that's as simple a gradient as you can, actually I should say, as simple a depth map as you'll ever see. It's just like I said, imagine you're looking at the world through a flashlight and it's pitch black and you can't see any color or detail, and all you see is the amount of light reflecting back. So everything close is bright. Now what I'm gonna do is save this as a file called, I'm just gonna call it map. But it's important that in this case, if you want to try a depth map, you save it as a Photoshop file. You could save a JPEG or a bitmap or whatever, but it needs to see a Photoshop file. I do not, however, need all the layers, so I can uncheck that box. And I'm just going to save that to the desktop. Now, what I'm going to do is I can turn that layer off in my master file. I'm going to go back and highlight or select my right image, because that's the one I want to adjust. And here's the trick, and a lot of people ask me about this. What you do is you go up here to the filter menu, and you go down here to distort. It's a filter called distort, displace. So you go distort, displace, and Photoshop asks you, how many pixels do you want to shift this? Well, we know that we don't want to shift it any vertical pixels, so I'm going to put a 0 in for vertical scale. Horizontal, I don't know, let's start with 50 pixels. You know, it varies. I'd say the very first move that you do on a conversion sets the entire depth budget for the image. You know, when I do a landscape, I lay it down, and that amount of laid down sort of defines, almost like if I'd shot it hyper or with a normal stereo image. You know, you have control over that right now. So let's say 50 for the horizontal scale. Then it's going to ask me, okay, where's that map? And I just say map PSD, there it is. And I go open. Now watch through your glasses and you're going to see it change. Boom. Okay. So I'm just going to hit the undo key so you can see before and after. So that's before and that's after. And that's just applying the world's simplest depth map. You get most of the way there. You can tell, you know, you might want to mess with the road at your feet, but more importantly, look over there on the left edge. See all that smearing? That's something that of course you could easily crop out. You know, but if you don't want to narrow the aspect ratio of your picture, you have to go in and manage to somehow mess with that. So an easy way is just to mat it or crop it out. Now, let's talk about my way of doing things, which is I do depth maps. Don't get me wrong. I do depth maps in some cases, but in a lot of cases I don't, because I can very easily accomplish the same thing with a couple of moves, okay? So I'm going to undo that, move to my depth map. Or you know what, heck, I'm just gonna save that and nah, I don't need that layer. Never mind, I've got the map up there. We're not gonna return to it. Of course, if I wanted to come back and work on this, I would be saving multiple layers, but just for sake of demonstration today, let me show you what I can do just with the Move, Scale, and Perspective tool. In this case, I've highlighted or selected my right image. I'm gonna go up here to the Edit menu this time and go down here to Transform, and that's where my Scale and Perspective tools live. So in this case, because it's a thing that I want to move only the top or bottom edge, I'm gonna choose Perspective. If it was something I wanted to move the right or left edge, I would use Scale, leaving the top or bottom, leaving the opposite edge anchored. Whatever edge you're moving, you're always leaving the opposite edge anchored. Okay, so what I did was I just hit Perspective. Now watch this. As you view through glasses, I'm gonna take the top edge of this. Again, it's perspective, so I'm just moving the top layer. I'm gonna move it to the right. Why? Because I'm in the right image. So anything that goes to the right recedes into the background. If I did the opposite, if I moved it to the left, whoa, the thing's coming out toward us, and that looks pretty unnatural, but you know, might be a cool effect. So keep in mind, I'm moving the sky and the road in this case, but we're gonna fix that in a second. So I'm just gonna say about there, okay? Now what I'm gonna do is go up, and I'm gonna go to, actually, let me hit enter on that. I'm gonna go back to Transform, where we just hit Perspective, but this time, I'm going to, I forgot to draw my box, sorry about that. I'm gonna draw a box around just the sky. And this is real sloppy. When you get into, you know, real hard work, you're gonna be like masters at selecting, but just for the ease of demonstration, I'm just gonna draw a rough box, go up here to Transform, go back to Perspective, and in this case, I'm moving the top edge, but the bottom edge of the sky only stays anchored to the road, okay? So I'm doing that. Now you see how it's almost like folding a piece of paper. You're basically, you laid it down away from you, and then you bent the edge back up toward you. And then of course we can easily go in and crop out all the nastiness, you know, if we don't want to see those rough edges right now. Let me just real quickly do that. And if you didn't even want to commit to a crop, you can create a separate layer with just a mask on it, and that'll take care of that. So basically, look at that. I mean, we've basically done the same thing, and I think in a better way than a depth map, because the road is more smooth. It's actually, the gradient still had some unevenness to it, you know, that's not quite as linear. Now, just for fun, you could also take the sky, and I just drew a box around it. I'm gonna go back to Perspective in this case, and I'm gonna tilt it toward us. You know, let's just say, hey, you know, we wanted to make the sky like we'd shot it like really hyper, and we just wanted to really accentuate the fact that, you know, we're messing with 3D. You know, we want to call attention to the fact that we're doing 3D. So you just crop away the distracting edges, and there you go. Now the road's going away from you, and the sky is coming toward you. So you can play with these individual elements in the scene. Now this is all fine and dandy with something as plain as a road and an open sky, but more often than not, you've got elements on top of each other. So all I'm going to do is actually switch over here. Let's say you're working with this element. And I'm just going to open this up, open my window up a little bit to include a little black space so we can kind of do the same thing we were doing before. So more often than not, this is going to be what you're faced with. And you're like, oh yeah, I'd love to lay the landscape back, but I've got that tree to deal with, you know? And what to do about the bird? It'd be nice if I could get bird shots like that all the time. But I sandwiched them in here. I just composited this thing for the sake of demonstration. So again, all I'm going to do is take this 2D image right down here. I'm going to make a copy of it to put in my left folder. Put the original, it doesn't matter which one's the original right now because they're both the same. Put the other one in my right folder, and that's the one that I personally will work on. Turn on the right folder because it wasn't on. Turn on the left folder. And by the way, if you do a thing like this, you want to email me details, normally the left image would look like that, and you wouldn't be able to see anything in Anaglyph. So I do have to go and turn this to lighten or screen, the blending mode of the left image. So like, it's almost like letting light shine through the left image and carrying with it only the red light into the right image. So that's how I do that. That's how I stack images like this. So let's say I wanted to go, I'm gonna wrap it up here pretty quickly, but I want to go up here and I've selected the right layer. I'm gonna go down to Transform. And oh, by the way, most of the time spent in conversions is selecting. You know, to make an accurate selection, somebody asked me what's my favorite selecting tools. Well, again, it's a combination. Some things, like the tree, might be better off with the quick selection tool, which you can kind of see what I'm doing here. As I click, it sort of grows the selection, and it's dependent on contrast, the contrast between adjacent pixels as to what it's choosing. The great thing about selections is you can always go back and save them. So like when I load in a selection here that I've pre-saved, I can go to tree, let's see, tree number 2, and boom, I've already saved it, and I can make another selection, save that, make another selection, save that. So that's the wonderful thing, but I'm not even gonna get that technical. I'm gonna pretend like you guys, all you know how to do is draw a lasso around something. We're just gonna do a simple conversion of this image with the lasso tool, which is just basically just looping something. So let's start by, just for fun, I'm gonna just for fun draw a lasso around the bird, real loose, because the sky, there's nothing behind him. It's empty. So if it was a bunch of detail behind him, I'd have to get in there and be pretty accurate. And what I want to do basically is just drag him. Let's say I go to the left. Now he's coming out past the picture, right? He or she, I don't know. Or if you want to recede, but now that's past the mountain. That doesn't look too natural. So let's say we just want to go to the left a little bit. So it pops out. We could have done this later too, by the way. I just wanted to go ahead and demonstrate the simplest of the tools, which is a simple move tool. Now, if we wanted to really get fancy, we could actually make that eagle, or the hawk, I forget what he is. I just snagged him off the web. We could make like the top wing come out toward us. How? Oops, I don't want to do the perspective on the whole photo. I just need to select him again a little bit. Now I'm gonna show you a unique thing, a problem that you'll encounter when you do this kind of move. And that is when you start, let me just add to my selection here a little bit. When you start shifting things like this and to make his wing come out, I'm gonna go to the perspective tool and I'm gonna move it to the right even more. But guess what happens? See that crack that opens up? There's like this jagged crack. Why? Because I've got a hole. I just created a hole in the layer. So before I go doing that, you can actually leave it selected. Before I go doing that, I'm gonna go over here, I'm gonna make a duplicate of my layer. I do have to unfortunately turn off the transform tool. I'm just gonna go duplicate, and I'm gonna work on the top of these 2 identical layers, okay? It doesn't do any good to work on the bottom because the top will cover it up. So in this case, I've still got my loop selected around the bird. I'm gonna go back to transform, go to perspective, go up here, grab the top, and then bring him out a little bit, or the opposite would be if you wanted to, make the bottom of the wing go in a little bit, so you can really start playing with perspective. And then if you wanted to, real quickly make the bird's head come out just a little bit, you could move that to the left. So you can really do a very quick yet effective transformation. And if you zoom in, you can actually see it didn't look like I did much, but his beak, pokes out. And I'd be a little more careful, to blend it properly. But in essence, what I've done is transform just the bird. Now let's look at like how we would do the landscape. Now keep in mind, depending on the image, you might or might not be able to do these in any order. So I've got, oh, by the way, if you want to keep all these separate layers, great. But what I usually do is once I've done a successful transformation and covered up the whole like that using a double layer, I'm just going to go and mash those layers together because, I don't want the file sizes to get too horrendously huge. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here. I'm going to select the whole, well, actually, if I don't make any selection, it assumes you want to adjust the whole layer. So I'm just going to go up here and do another perspective transformation. You'll find that you use perspective a lot simply because a lot of what you're doing is landscapes and lines are horizontal, and you're shifting things because your eyes are aligned left to right. You're creating the parallax left to right. So I'll show you the scale tool in just a minute. So I'm just going to basically grab the top edge of the whole layer and lay it back. Okay, and now you see how I do that. As I do that, it's starting to, bend the entire, again, like leaning a piece of paper away from you. Now that's probably a little more extreme than I might normally do, but let's go ahead and I'm just gonna very quickly, hopefully, use the selection tool, the quick selection tool, to get this tree. Now again, this is where your real time comes into these things. If I was doing a selection and I wanted this conversion to look as good as it possibly could, I'd be going in here and zoomed in and fine tuning the edge. But I'm just going to do a real, you know what? I said I wasn't going to do this. Forget it. Never mind. I'm going to draw a loop around the thing. We're just going to rough it. Now, because I want the tree, think about, remember how I described my storybook method? We're laying the scene down and then we're popping up the things in the scene, okay? So we're gonna pop up the tree by grabbing the top edge and moving it back to the left because we're in the right image. So all I'm gonna do is draw a lasso. Now this can be pretty tight on the left edge because that's the direction we're moving. As a matter of fact, I don't have to be too tight until maybe I get to the mountain, right about where the tree joins the mountain. I'm gonna duck in there and get pretty close. And then here I can ease up a little bit. I'm gonna duck in here, get pretty close. Duck in here, pretty close. Basically, I'm hugging the left side of the tree pretty good. But what I'm gonna do is leave a little bit on the right side of the tree so that, again, I sort of cover up some of my mistakes. And what I'm actually doing is covering up the tree that will be left there because I'm copying, you know, one of the trees. I'm actually gonna enlarge that just a little bit. So you'll see what I mean here in just a second. So right now, I've just got a real rough tree selection. I'm gonna go to transform and go perspective and show you what I mean. Now, I know it's gonna recede the tree just in this example, but let's say I went to the left. See how that crack opens up real quickly? Well, I might be able to get away with doing this adjustment without even doing that double layer, that duplicate layer I was just showing you where it covers up the holes. If I'm sloppy, you know, if I'm allowed to have enough slop on the right side, I can go ahead and move this thing to the left. Oh, no, never mind. Crack opened up. So I do have to go ahead and create that second layer. I thought I'd be able to get away without it, but no, I don't know what I was thinking. So let me just do my duplicate layer trick again. I've still got my rough selection made here, my loop-de-loop. Go back to transform perspective. I've got the top edge of the tree, and I'm just gonna come back to the left, okay? Now see what happens is that loose selection sort of buys me some room on the side. And what I mean by that is if I hadn't done that, let's say I had made a tighter selection. I'm just gonna shave a little bit off here real fast. Oops, sorry about that. I'm just gonna make it kind of tight on the left side, on the right side, sorry, by taking away some selection. Now we're gonna go back. We're gonna go back to our perspective tool, and we're gonna do this. Now see, I just don't have as much room before you see the duplicate of the tree behind it. That's why I made sort of a wider selection on the right side, the side I'm moving away from, because I don't wanna see a duplicate of what I'm trying to shift, right? So that's simply, I'm just gonna go back here and regrow my selection real quick and very sloppily just redraw a wider area around it, kind of like that. Thank you guys for hanging in there with me. I hope this is all clicking and, you know, it's finally sort of starting to, you know, set off some bells in your head and you want to try this yourself. It's not that hard. So now I've got a looser selection on the right-hand side. I'm going to go back to perspective, grab the top, move it to the left, and guess what? I've got a lot more room to play with. I mean, for all intents and purposes, I could go that far before I start seeing more tree, and that's plenty far, unless you think you want the thing falling on your head. So notice though that I did create a little situation here because I was real sloppy in my selection. I had a little, you know, a little area where the mountain just quite, you know, pops out where the tree is, but it should be back where the mountain is. So I can actually go back and very quickly just do a move and sort of pop that back into place. And again, depending on how much time you would spend, you could see I left a rough edge, but you can really just shift individual items around and, you know, create, actually, if I add to that selection a little bit, that might help a little bit. You can really sort of fine tune and place things at their proper depth. Okay, that's a lot better right there. So you don't have where the tree meets the mountain. I could still go in and clean it up for purposes of, you know, we'll say, you know, that's done for a very simple example. Now, last thing I'm going to do on this image is just go in here and bend. Remember, the mountain's still sort of laying backward because I tilted the whole landscape back. So I'm just gonna, that very distant mountain, I'm gonna go in and just sort of bend that and straighten it back up. Just like I did the tree, I'm gonna do its own, ooh, that's a really ugly selection there. Although it's blank sky, it wouldn't hurt anything. But again, I'm just gonna go up here to perspective, transform, I should say edit menu, transform, perspective, and just bend that mountain up a little bit so it's not quite as distant. Now, if you wanted to, you know, let's say it's oh, that's a little close. It should be farther in the distance. No problem, just shift it a little bit. Oops, let me go ahead and apply that, just shift it into the background, okay? So there, now the bird's not in front of the mountain, for example. And if you wanted to, of course, you can go back, and if you've already saved your selections, you wouldn't even have to draw another loop around it. But we could, of course, draw the loop around the bird, bring him forward, you know, as much as the slop allowed of your selection on the other side. And there you have it. And again, I was a little sloppy down here at the bottom of the mountain, but I've even gone in and cleaned up stuff where I thought, man, I'm gonna have to like scrap this image and start over if I really wanna fix this. And somehow, a lot of times I go in and I'm able to fix it, you know? Like in this case, I could say, well, you know, if I move that whole thing, it might create a problem, but I'm just gonna bend that little sliver of mountain that I just selected. I'm just gonna bend that backward to meet the rest of the mountain. So it's almost like a little hill, you know, leading up to the mountain or something like that. So again, you see a little roughness because I'm obviously really messy with my selections just for today's example. But I mean, that's pretty much it. You know, when you compare that to the original, let me just turn off this, oops, the original image, which is in 2D, in about 5 minutes, I'm most of the way there. And then the rest of it is like detail work and cleanup and stuff like that. And again, select. I can't tell you how important it is to learn whatever program you're using, learn selecting, saving your selections, layering, masking. That helps, you know, when you're replacing a sky, you want to mask out the original sky and let the new sky shine through. So that really, also, by the way, I use a trackball, which helps immensely. A trackball lets me basically, I can actually like click 2 buttons on it and let go, and then just creep the ball along with my fingers. Go have a sandwich, come back and continue making the same selection. I don't have to hold a mouse down and lift a mouse up and scroll it across the desk and all that stuff, because forget that. You'll screw up your selections faster than you can realize. And the final thing I wanted to people to understand is that I edit, because I did have a couple questions on, well, why don't you just edit why do you create 2 layers and edit the one of the layers? Why don't you just edit the red channel of a single layer? And the answer is because you don't have access to the full tool set. I think you might be able to do a scale on a single channel, but you definitely can't do like a perspective. So you're limited in some of the things you can do. Whereas if you do a full layer, you can do anything you want to. Okay, you're not limited by just working on a single channel. So I think that's pretty much it.